Okay, recently Boris Johnson made a speech about Margaret Thatcher and her effect on British politics, and he made a what was considered to be a controversial quote about IQ, which was that it's relevant to the conversation that IQs are spaced over a certain spectrum. So you have, obviously the way IQ tests are done is that 100 is the average or median, and then you can go all the way down to 60 and then all the way up to 160 or even higher.
Correct.
And his inference from this was that because people have different amounts of ability, therefore equality is not really achievable, or a certain level of inequality is all that can be achieved, is another way of putting it. Jazza, you've just read the speech. What did you think of it?
I think we're both agreed that the media has made a bit of a shitstorm over this, that maybe wasn't as necessary. In like a speech that is, to be completely honest, very, very long. There's one paragraph about IQ, and he says the word IQ 3 times. In like it's interesting that got pulled up. But I think that the interesting debate that has come up about that is about equality and the income gap. He was promoting the Thatcherite idea of like loads of money, and well, he said that maybe not going to that extent, but he said that we should be encouraging disparity in wealth so that people want to work hard and become more wealthy. Now, we're going to be debating this, and I'm going to say that the question that we're using is greed good? And I'm going to say that greed is not good, and Jimmy's going to say that greed is good.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, in the grand tradition of British politics, we're going to get two people who don't understand economics talking about economics. But I wouldn't say...
It's not just that. It's the idea of, like, the well-being of society. Does this make a functioning, prosperous, and a happy society? And I don't think it does. Of course, you need to have a certain amount of competition. So I'm the gun's gone and I'm off at the bat now.
already prevaricating though.
In order for there to be a functioning society, you need to have a certain amount of competition. One of the reasons that something like the Soviet Union didn't work was because doctors were being paid the same as farmers. You need to have people. You need to give people incentives to work hard to grow the economy, so that society in general can be more prosperous. But you also have to find a balance, and it has been shown that countries and societies that have more like a wider gap between rich and poor are less happy.
How are you measuring happiness in those studies?
I can't remember the actual methodology, but there's ways of, like, they measure it through envy, contentment, whether they, like, psychological testing.
Right. Well, I know that some of the most equal societies, or considered to be the most equal societies, are the Scandinavian countries.
Yes.
And I also...
Which is always a dodgy example to put up, because they have high rates of suicide.
I was just about to make exactly that point. So these countries are very equal. They have often... I mean, it's wrong to talk about them all as the same because they have various policies, but they have sort of more a focus on the welfare state. One of them, I probably should have done the research for this, but one of them has a policy whereby new mothers are given cots and a whole load of baby stuff just by default. But they do have a very high rate of suicide. I don't know.
That's probably not. They tie that in with seasonal affective disorder, and also in suicide. When you already have a society that has a lot of suicide, some suicide begets more suicide.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I mean, I'm assuming it is more complicated than like the pure economics situation, but I think it's interesting that you can't really measure happiness, which actually in terms of politics is a huge problem, because in theory the whole idea is to try and make people more happy, isn't it?
That's not always. It's to make loads of money.
Well, that'd be making some people happy, but
Don't you? So, do you think that somebody's? Because one of the points that the mayor brought up, the idea about the IQ, even though it was a very small part of that speech. Do you think that the way I read it, and from what he said, and from what a lot of the media backlash has been about, it's been saying that he's implying that people are born with innate skills, and that kind of your destiny in life, of whether you're going to be successful or not, is determined as soon as you come out of the womb.
I didn't get that impression. Like, I didn't get quite that extreme impression from reading the speech. What he said was that it was relevant to the conversation that IQs are spread across a continuum, more or less in those words. And I think that probably is true. And I think it probably means that a certain amount of inequality is probably desirable, in that it's probably an indicator that society is free enough that people can express their varying abilities.
But he's implying that the people who are at the top of he used the crisp packet metaphor.
Right.
Those crisps...
It was a cereal packet. Cereal packet
was
metaphor.
It cereal?
Yeah, it's cornflakes.
Oh, sorry, I'll get my food metaphors. I'll read up on that. But the cornflakes at the top of the cereal packet are there because they deserve to be there. And I look at the people who are at the top of our cereal packet, and I see a lot of people who I don't think are necessarily the best people for the job, but they have connections. They happen to have been into the right, been brought up in the right family, and they are not, like I said, not necessarily the best person for the job. What do you think about that? Do you think, because I felt like he was implying that the people who are at the top of their game, whether it be in business or politics, are there because they are cleverer.
I think if you put that to him, he'd probably say that wasn't what he meant, because whatever else you think of Boris Johnson, he seems a pretty smart guy. He went to Oxford.
He couldn't answer the 2 IQ questions that were on it when he was.
They weren't IQ questions; they were more riddles, really.
But those are the kind of things that they have in IQ tests.
Do they? I think
Yeah.
I'm sure it's more verbal reasoning and okay, whatever. Also, when you take an IQ test, it's almost always written down, and he was asked the questions verbally. So I don't think it's fair. It's a fair representation anyway. But you've completely derailed me, and I forgot the point was that he'd probably agree that your success in life is based partly on your background, like what your parents did, what school you went to, all the connections you made. My problem with your opposition to that in a way is that I don't really see that there's any other way that society can operate really than that. That's
because that's the only society we've lived in.
Well, there's certain things about the way the education system works and the way you feed people into that changes things. But in terms of the connections thing is always going to be true, right? Like you can't. There's no way you can feasibly stop people using their connections to get ahead in any given jobs market.
No, but it's not just connections. It's also you are trying to get into journalism. How many journalist posts do you apply for, and they expect you to work for free or next to nothing? Only a certain type of person is going to be able to afford to do that.
That is true. Yeah, that is a huge problem. I do agree.
See,
but again,
your own heartstrings there.
But then who are you going to ask to pay for that? Are you going to ask the company to pay for that? Or are you going to ask the government to subsidise that? Or how exactly is that going to work?
Well, in an ideal world, we would have companies paying people to do work. I mean, that's not so much of an alien concept, right? But I think if need be, if people are on internships and are having to live off of those internships, then I think there needs to be some kind of regulation to ensure that they are actually able to live. And so I would support interns who are out of full-time education. I would support them getting at least the minimum wage for the hours that they do.
I mean, that seems fair, but we've already sort of dropped down into the minutiae of equality. But broadly speaking, do you think that certain people deserve to make more money than other people, I guess?
Yes, but I don't think that the people who deserve to make a lot of money are necessarily the ones that make it.
Who do you think deserves to get a lot of money then?
I think the people who contribute most to society should end up being the ones who make the most money.
All right, who decides what a good contribution is then?
Sorry, say again?
Who decides what a good contribution to society is then?
Well, when I'm the overruling emperor, obviously, I decide.
It's very contingent upon you remaining alive then, isn't it?
Well, yes, because once I become all-seeing emperor, then, I become immortal. Didn't you know that's what happened?
It seems a lot of your political policies sort of rely on you being supreme leader of some sort.
Yeah.
But in seriousness, how would you decide who's made a good contribution to society?
I think that's very difficult, and thankfully, because I'm not going to be supreme leader, I don't come up with that. And to a certain extent, we do need the market to be able to decide who gets what money. But I think that there should be regulation, because some people, certain cultures are cultivated, like the ones that we have seen in investment banking, high-frequency trading, where risk is huge, where deregulation created huge bubbles in property and stocks.
Yeah.
And don't you think that that needs to be reined in? So the greed that they had ended up affecting all of the people who don't even know what a stocks and shares spreadsheet looks like, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
So that small group of people's greed has negatively affected other people who are perhaps cultivating a more heartfelt and happy society, like nurses.
Right, okay. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know if there would be certain unforeseen consequences as the result of legislation and regulation, if that would in turn harm something else that you want to protect. Because neither of us have a hugely in-depth understanding of economics, so I'd be hesitant to actually do something like that when I don't fully understand the ramifications of it, basically.
Well, we both need to go to university and get an economics degree then.
And then come back. I don't know. Again, I think it really comes down to the idea of do you agree with the substance of what Boris was saying, which was that some people should get ahead of others? We both agree about that. The thing we're arguing about is who decides or who doesn't decide in the case of the free market, who gets to the top and who gets to the bottom. And I think the free market, generally speaking, is a better way of doing that, because otherwise it comes down to a small group of people deciding who's better and who's worse, basically.
But Boris Johnson said that the smartest people should be the ones who should earn the most, who should do best, no?
Yeah, he did roughly say something like that.
So what happens when somebody who has an IQ of 140 is born into Hackney?
Okay.
They are not going to be able to have the same opportunities as a guy who's born with 101 or just 100 IQ and has parents who can pay for him to go to Eton. And so it seems like the kind of world that Boris Johnson is wanting to cultivate, he's implying that the people who go to Eton because they're cleverer. And the people who therefore go on to Oxford are cleverer and more deserving.
Well, he did get a scholarship to Eton, so that maybe is reflective of his own background. But yeah, I can see where you're going with that. Mm-hmm. The only thing is, I don't know that you can. I don't know that I particularly want to say to rich people, well, you can't give your children this sort of lifestyle you want to give them.
Oh no, but don't you think that people who are born into poverty and therefore are lower down on the ladder when they start off in life should be helped out in some way so that they can reach their full potential? We should have people who are able to go up and go down that ladder as well. The thing is, too many people, everybody wants to go up the ladder, and people who are already high up the ladder don't want their children to slip down it. But sometimes that is what needs to happen in order for there to be space higher up for the people who are more deserving, to be completely honest, because they are smarter, because they come from a more varied background, because diversity helps markets and helps businesses. And that isn't possible at the moment when it is a small selection of people who are clinging onto the top rungs and not letting anybody up. Kicking them down.
I don't know that people at the top are deliberately kicking other people down, because I don't know that it's generally speaking in their interest to do so.
No, but by keeping their wealth within their family and doing favours within a small group of people, they are by default kicking people down stopping people from getting up the ladder.
Oh, but I mean, you're part of like a group of, you're part of the sort of London clique of YouTubers, and don't you guys appear in each other's videos and you help each other out and you lend each other equipment and a huge list of stuff, and that in a way does keep I guess the viewership within a set kind of clique. Aren't arguably not you so much, because you don't have the same crazy number of views as some of the other people you're friends with, but isn't the YouTube London clique guilty of exactly that thing as well?
Oh yes, I completely agree. I completely agree, but I don't like that.
Right. But I mean, what would you do then to change something like that? So
put my ideas of economics to apply it to the YouTube community. This is interesting. I like this. This is a master's dissertation. I would have the governing body, which in YouTube's case would be YouTube, the company. I would have them opening up something like the creator space to people with lower subs.
Right.
So that they have the opportunity to use that equipment as well. Because at the moment, obviously, there's a cap. I would open it up every, maybe 2 days a month, or maybe a weekend a month, where they invite a select few of people who have the potential to make good videos, but maybe don't have the resources.
Okay, but surely the people who are likely to make the best videos are probably the people with the highest subs, in a way.
Not necessarily. Have you seen Marcus and Alfie?
I've seen good YouTube videos from people who don't have any subs, but my point is that the people with the most resources end up putting the most time into something, and sort of success begats success in a way.
That's very true, but at the end of the day, you still need to buy a camera.
Yeah. You
still need to buy microphone and editing software and a computer and all of that kind of stuff, and not everybody. Which is why, especially UK YouTube is actually gradually becoming more varied, but it's why the majority of us are middle class white males, because we're the people with the money anyway as well.
Right, yeah. I mean, the male thing doesn't really kind of follow, because there are presumably an equal number of rich females who aren't or are doing it. Or who want to do it. That's a complete different argument, but it seems as if you agree roughly with what Boris said, that it should be based on raw ability above all other things.
But I think that's a lovely idea, but I don't think that Boris Johnson practices what he preaches.
But I think it's an inevitable facet of life that just because you're talented doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful, and that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with money. But you should
have the chance to be successful, and the chance to be successful on the same footing as somebody who is going to be able to work for 6 months for free, or somebody who has had their education paid for. That's the kind of society that I'd like to live in. Because my kids, because we're in the generation that's probably going to be lower down the ladder than our parents, and the first generation ever.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, I think that is that's not because we are less intelligent or we have lower ability. In fact, we're the highest educated generation ever. So technically, we should be able to get more than our parents financially. But
that depends how valuable you think education is, really. Even if like me and you drop a rung in the class ladder, we're still going to have better lives because of increased access to medicine, better technology. Our lives are still going to be better than our parents on average, just because of progress, basically.
Mhm.
And isn't
But it's still a very bitter pill to swallow, Jimmy.
I don't know. I mean, if like you have a better life than your parents, regardless of whether in the scheme of things you're lower or higher in the class rank, I don't really see that you have that much cause for complaint, really. You know, what I'm trying to say, I guess,
You're a lot more content than I am.
what I'm trying to say is that I'm not sure equality should be as important a goal as just generally raising the standard of life through things such as access to medicine and education and whatnot. I'm not too bothered. Obviously it's a hugely complicated argument. You could argue that more equality actually is more conducive to progress, which I wouldn't be able to really disagree with because I don't have that level of knowledge. But personally, I'm more interested in raising the general level of thing rather than pursuing equality in and of itself, is I guess the point I would make.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I think we should probably wrap up there because we've
Yeah.
spoken for about 20 minutes because we lack talking.
Hmm.
What did you guys, do any of you guys know anything about economics more than we do? Because quite frankly, we are no better than a couple of Daily Mail readers at the moment. What do you think of our YouTube analogy? Did you like that little metaphor we chucked in there? I was really pleased with it. I thought it worked. And also, who won, Jazza or Jimmy? It was Jazza. Let's be fair, it's Jazza.
It probably was that time,
Not
actually.
really being a debate, did it? It was a lovely talk, but it's a debate.
So we've broken our own format, and I do apologise for that. But we'll try harder next time. We lack the resources.
No, we won't. All right, bye everybody. Bye. Say bye, Jimmy.
Bye.
We used to drink bottled gins and the whole world had to sing. Meet the trees and untouched bark. We used to dance, so take a chance. I lost my mind to young romance. Yeah, I don't mind, I got it back. Half the time I'm waiting for a second chance. Half the time